Hope is not a good strategy for growing your law firm with Michael Duffy, episode 166. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another great guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel. And for those of you tuning in for the first time, you're in for a treat. We have a super special guest today. This is an attorney of a very large law firm who's going to help us navigate and share and talk about what it was like to grow his firm to that size. And we're going to talk about the challenges that are facing his firm today versus what you might be experiencing. We're at whatever size firm you are at. So I'm really excited to have our guest on today, and I appreciate him coming and joining us and spending his time with us. Before we jump into this, if you haven't got your tickets for the Law Firm Growth Summit, I encourage you to go check it out at lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. We're going to have dozens of speakers. We don't have the final tally yet, but it's probably going to be close to 40 speakers, experts and leaders in the industry, talking about how to position your firm for the future, how to understand and navigate the underlying shift in the legal industry that is happening and has been accelerated because of COVID, and be able to implement that and navigate it in your firm. So go to lawfirmgrowthsummit.com today. Make sure you join us. That's February 9th to 11th. We are excited, hopefully, to see you there. Let me share an exciting tool that I recently came across that is a game changer for law firms that bill hourly or by the project, otherwise known as flat fee billing. The 2020 Legal Trends Report published by Clio rates how important various items are in a client choosing your firm. You may be surprised to know that the third most important decision factor for someone choosing a lawyer is the ability to pay with a payment plan. The challenge that law firm owners face is the risk of a client not making good on that payment plan. Most attorneys don't offer payment plans because of that. The problem is now solved with LawFunder. LawFunder allows you to easily add a payment option to all your client invoices and retainer replenishment requests that does not require credit checks, applications, or any other complex process. The client's able to use their existing credit cards, allowing them to earn points and miles, access credit card specials on interest rates, and any other tools they use to manage their cash. When I saw this tool, I was blown away. Most importantly, it removes all the risk from the law firm and makes an easy and painless process to the payment process. So if you want to check off the box on one of the top factors in new client decisions, if you want to decrease your accounts receivable and get paid immediately, LawFunder is the solution. Go to lawfunder.com. That's lawfundar.com/profitwithlaw to learn more. Let me introduce you to our guest, Michael E. Duffy, managing partner of Long Island, New York law firm Duffy and Duffy. He's a highly experienced civil litigator with a passion for the law and a desire to represent victims of medical malpractice. Mr. Duffy concentrates his practice on catastrophically injured victims and wrongful death claims involving medical malpractice and personal injury in New York. Throughout his career, he has been actively involved in a number of professional organizations and has been repeatedly named best lawyers in America. He has recovered millions of dollars on behalf of his clients, and his landmark settlements have been widely publicized both locally and nationally. If you haven't heard of him yet, you've heard of him now. Michael Duffy. Mike, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here.
It's my absolute pleasure, and I appreciate the time that you're going to give us today. I like to start off easy. Some people may not know who you are. Even the ones who know who you are may think of you in a revered status. They don't know you as a person. Take us to the person, Mike. You know, you went to law school. You started a law firm. Talk about that story. How did you get started, and how did you get to the size firm that you are today?
Well, thank you. First of all, anybody who holds me, or frankly, any lawyer in a revered status should rethink their priorities. Well, thank you. I started the firm basically right out of law school. I went to St. John's Law School, having gone to St. John's undergrad as well. I went to law school for a number of reasons. First of all, it was a really bad economic market. I was a finance major, intending entirely to go to Wall Street, and there were just no jobs. So I went to law school. My father had been in the law for many, many years, and kind of grew up at his knee. Me and my four siblings, all from a very young age, he would make his bedtime reading to us, reading anatomy books and things of that nature, because he was a medical malpractice lawyer, as silly as that may sound. But, children don't care what their father is reading to them as long as their father is reading to them. So I went to law school. I graduated in 1994. I had been working from the time I was about 20 years old. I had been working at a small law firm on Long Island. And at that law firm, we did mostly criminal defense work and some general small personal injury type work. When I got out of law school, I went there for about 6 months right after I took the bar. And in October of 1996, or maybe it was a little longer than 6 months. In October of 1996, I started this firm. At that time, my dad was working at a firm in Manhattan.
Michael, let me jump in for 1 second.
Yeah.
Did you work for another firm before you started your firm? Was there a period of time that you worked somewhere else?
Yeah, so it was probably about a year as a lawyer that I worked for a firm called Mason and Tinney in Mineola, New York. And as I say, they did mostly criminal defense work and had a small personal injury practice. I focused primarily on the personal injury side. I did do some of the criminal defense work, but mostly the personal injury side. When I left there, I left for a number of reasons, most of it having to do with wanting to make more money, just like everybody else. I felt I could make more money on my own. So I started the law firm, and in a sort of fit of hubris, refused to accept any help from my father or frankly, anybody else who I should have looked to for help. But I was young and dumb. So started the firm. Within about 4 months, I started thinking I better look for a job because this was not going to work out. And fortunately, I managed to get a hold of a case and tried that case in Suffolk County and won the case. That case sort of launched the firm. I started from that point forward taking in many trials from many people around Long Island. At that time, there were a lot of law firms, small law firms, that had a few medical malpractice cases, but didn't really know what they were doing with them. So I went around and I talked to all of them and made the deal with or as many as I could, that I would try the case and we would split the fee. And worst case scenario for them was they got rid of those cases out of their office. I referred to it at the time as the stinky fish store, because I went around and I said to each lawyer, you have a case that's in the corner of your office and it stinks like bad fish because it's never going to get better. Let's deal with it. We'll take care of it now. So I went around and I tried a lot of cases. And in a 2-year period, I tried about 15 medical malpractice cases on Long Island to verdict, another 20 or so that I picked juries and resolved the cases, and many others that I resolved before picking the jury. In doing that, started building a bit of a reputation for being able to try medical malpractice cases, or frankly, any case. Before that, I say we because my wife was with me the entire time. So anytime I think about it, I think about the two of us doing it together. But I also did a lot of everything. Whatever came in the door, in order to pay the bills, I did what needed to be done. I did house closings, I did criminal defense work, I did zoning law, which frankly I knew nothing about, but I figured out enough to write paper to try to get Home Depot into a jurisdiction. Basically did whatever was necessary. I developed a group of lawyers in Nassau and Suffolk County where I would agree to go do overnight arraignments in the city for them because they didn't want to get out of bed, and I did. And they would pay me $50 or $100 to do it, but I had a mortgage and a baby and a wife and did what had to be done. So those are the things that every lawyer who has a small firm or a single lawyer firm does. We all do it. You do what is necessary to pay the bills, and you hope that you can develop the specialty you want to develop while you're doing that. So went like that for a number of years, and was trying medical malpractice cases and had every intention of staying by myself. And in a relatively small firm, I had 2 associates by 2000. And at that time, my father made the decision to leave his firm in the city, and basically told me he was going to come out to Long Island and start his own law firm and compete against me in medical malpractice. That seemed like a really bad idea to me. He had a lot more experience than I did and had a lot bigger verdicts than I did. So I did not want to be competing with him. I also did not really want to be in business with him. He and I had a very healthy competitive streak between the two of us. So ultimately, we set that aside and we made a deal. So starting in 2001, my father joined us. And when he came on board, a lot changed in our business. He was not content to do whatever was necessary. So we put a lot of effort and time and money and resources into building up the firm that we have today. Unfortunately, my dad passed last December, but until that time, thank you. Until that time, we had just a wonderful 20-year run together.
That's awesome. There's so many different places I can go with the story and questions that I have. Let me go back to the beginning. When you first started, did you ever question whether 1 year of experience out in the industry was enough before starting your own firm in the early days?
Well, I had the hubris of youth. So when I first started, like day one, no, I didn't think about that at all because I didn't really know what went into it. I can tell you that I called my father at his office in Manhattan and told him I was leaving and I'm going to start my own law firm. And he immediately said, go back inside and get your job back because this is not going to be as easy as you think it is. And honestly, I think that had he not been so aggressive about telling me that it wasn't going to work, that I might well have done that, particularly when several months later, no work was coming in. I started in October, and by the springtime, I had worked through the resources I'd set aside to start my firm. And the things that I thought were going to happen didn't really happen at first. Cases did not easily settle. Things that I thought were slam dunk cases that we were going to be able to rely upon just didn't happen. So by the 6-month mark, certainly, I was sure we were going to fail. But we persevered, and I got, as I said earlier, I was able to try a particular medical malpractice case, and was fortunate enough to win it. And in doing so, sort of launched where things went from there. But in the early days, yes, it was insanely stressful, very, very challenging, very difficult. The major benefit was the overhead was non-existent. I didn't have an office. I worked out of my garage, and my daughter, who's now in law school herself, was stapling papers for me and collating things. So we had a really small staff. So it certainly was a challenge, and it took a lot of perseverance to stay the course.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you say that at the beginning, you went out and you were looking for those stinky fish cases, the cases that people just didn't want to have, get it off their plate. I'm assuming that those are all contingencies, so you weren't getting paid until they were completed. How did you navigate all I'm sure that they weren't all winners, right? You were going to work
No.
them. You were going to take them through to trial and see them through to the end. Part of why they were a stinky fish probably was because they didn't have a great legal position to begin with.
Right.
So, what did that look like? Like what percentage of wins did you need to be able to survive? And how did you navigate that runway until those wins started coming through?
Well, we didn't really need a lot to succeed. We needed just enough to pay our bills. At that time, I wasn't looking to buy big houses and Mercedes Benz and things of that nature. I was looking to pay the bills and build a reputation. I looked at the entire process as another year in school that I was learning, and I was putting in my dues to get the experience necessary to build what I wanted ultimately to have. And my wife tells the great story. At that time, there were a lot of credit card offers where you could transfer a balance for zero interest and zero payments, and you didn't have to make any payments for 6 or 8 or 10 months, whatever the opportunity was. And my wife became a pro at moving credit card balances from one card to another and shutting down an old card and moving the debt until the debt of paying our lives, not exorbitant debt, just groceries and diapers for my daughter and things of that nature. So it was really a challenge. So I looked at the entire process of the tour, the Stinky Fish Tour, as the numbers suggest, and suggested then and suggest today, that most cases are going to settle. And one of the single most important thing you can do to get a case to settle then and today is to be ready to try the case, to let the other side know that you are not afraid to try the case, you know the medicine, you know the facts, and you're prepared to go forward, and to let the court know that you're prepared to go forward. So my argument then and today was I was always ready. It didn't matter. There were days where I answered ready on 4 or 5 or 6 different cases, whether I was ready or not. And that was really the only way that I felt we could do this. Is I would get the education, and then I would force some action in the court system. So we would have there were times where I would be asked to try a case against the defense lawyer who I knew was in the middle of another trial, but I would go and I'd yell and scream and cry and carry on in front of the court to force the judge to say to the defense lawyer, go get him some money so we can get rid of this annoying person, and basically did whatever was necessary to force the action. You can't force them to settle, but you can try as hard as you can to force them into a jury room. And by pushing these cases into a jury room, I felt that we would be able to at least generate enough to get through the year or two that I was dedicating to this.
Yeah, I mean, hearing the early stages is really, really cool, because there are people listening to the show who, they're early in creating their practice, and they're in that game of carrying credit card debt and worrying about how they're going to pay their bills.
Yeah.
And hearing that you went through that too at the beginning is it's almost reassuring that, hey, we're going to get past this. All we got to do is stick with it and make sure that we've got a good plan. And that's what I'm here for, is to make sure that my listeners have a good plan. So let me ask you a question.
Well, just to,
Sure.
on that topic, sorry to interrupt, but on that topic, it requires a lot of help from where you are in society too. There are things that I was able to do then that you would never be able to do today. But there are other things you can do today that you couldn't do then. So for instance, I was in the middle of a trial in Suffolk County many years early in this process. And I had to ask the court for a day's continuance so I could go do a house closing, so that I could get the check from the house closing, so that I could take that check and pay the expert that needed to testify in the medical malpractice case. I didn't have the money to put the expert on the stand. And if the court had said no, I'd have had a big problem. So there were a number of things that today would never happen. One, a judge would never agree to that today. Two, there's no way that you could make enough money from a house closing to pay today's experts. They were cheaper then. It wasn't quite as common to have experts or doctors who spent most of their career testifying. Really, back then, I was paying them for their time. So whatever the dollars we paid was commensurate with the time. So today, they're going to charge a whole lot more. But you can do things today that really I couldn't do then. There were only 2 or 3 firms at that time who were doing medical malpractice on a larger scale. They didn't really want to become involved in my cases. They didn't want to partner up with me on my cases. They didn't want to show me the ropes. They basically wanted to keep the competition dead. Today, you can work with a firm like ours. You can learn enough about medical malpractice to decide if that really is something you want to do, or if you want to make it a tangential part of your business. So, when one door closes, others do open up.
Yeah, there's also today there are finance companies specifically financing the costs of a medical malpractice case, where the onus is still on the law firm, but at least they're providing that cash to get those expert witnesses or the extensive reports or things that you need to purchase in order to get that case through. So you do have other options where it's not, hey, I need to do a house closing to be able to pay for this next step.
There are certainly options on the resource side. It's still the biggest issue for that is you don't want to kind of get taken for a ride. There are a lot of experts who will happily charge you to tell you what you want to hear, and then either not be credible on a witness stand or refuse to show up at the time of trial. So yes, the resources are there in terms of dollars, but it really takes a lot of effort to know enough about the case that you're really educating the expert more so than the expert educating you.
Very interesting. Absolutely very interesting. I want to ask you this question, and I've been in my mind, I've been trying to figure out which way to go about it so that I'm not injecting my opinion into the conversation, because I have an opinion here. But I'm going to frame it like this. Back in the beginning, when you were starting, the only way to really get started as a brand new lawyer was referrals or collaborating with other professionals. Social media, the internet, none of that existed. Right. Today, it's a different world, right? Google My Business, reviews on Google, those matter a lot today where they didn't matter back then. And there's less and less people who are coming through the referral route as we get to the younger generation that's requiring legal services. You also mentioned that there's this phenomenon that happened when your dad joined the firm where he wasn't interested in doing whatever it takes. And it sounded to me like at that point, you focused 100% on medical malpractice and stopped doing anything else. And if I understood you correctly, what happened is that by honing in on your strong suit and taking away the other distractions, that's really what created the firm that's here today. That's what gave you the momentum to start really building the practice. So I don't know if I'm reading into the lines, but that's what I heard from on my end. My question is, when somebody, and we're not just solos listening to the show, so I want to make sure that we're having this conversation at various stages of the law firm growth. But where do you sit on the thought process of somebody getting really, really specific about what they're doing and who they're serving? Is that something that they should be doing from day one? Is that something that they should be doing only after they've achieved a certain level of success in their practice? What's your opinion on that?
Well, for starters, I think that's a very individualized answer. I mean, there's no one right answer to that question. If you have unlimited pockets and you don't have to worry about paying your mortgage, you don't have to worry about putting your kids through school, then I think it is absolutely focus on one thing. But if you don't have that luxury, then you have to do what you have to do. One of the things that makes good lawyers, particularly good contingency fee lawyers, is a lack of fear. You have to be fearless in this. So if you're facing a scenario where your resources are limited, but you believe in yourself, then I am 100% for fearlessly moving forward and fearlessly focusing on what you know you can be good at. In order to do what any of us do for a living, you have to have that ego within you that says, I am good enough to do this. I can stand in front of a jury and convince this jury that I am right and the other side is wrong. If you want to do medical malpractice work, you're going to cross-examine the defendant doctor himself, who's the only person, or herself, who's the only person who actually saw this patient. You're going to be cross-examining Harvard-educated, Yale-educated, Columbia-trained doctors and nurses who are going to come in and say you are wrong, and you need to have the perseverance to stand up and say, no, I'm right, and let me tell you why I'm right, and let me show this jury why I'm right. That degree of perseverance, that degree of fearlessness and ego goes into everything we do. So for that person who's saying, I want to do a particular type of law, I want to do a particular type of case, but I'm worried. Believe in yourself, and if you do believe in yourself, ultimately you will succeed. So, saying that there's no right answer, it becomes very important to focus on specialization in today's world. Most people are not going to have the resources available to them to compete with the large advertising entities, the large social media groups that are pushing out content daily, multiple times a day. There are companies today that are literally lead generating all day long, and all they do is push out content, and then sell you the leads. And they're not selling you everything that's wonderful. They're selling you, 99.9% cases that you're not, or leads that you're not going to do anything with.
They're sending stinky fish.
They're sending worse than stinky fish. They're sending dead fish.
Right.
So, it's going to be hard to compete in that environment if you don't have the resources to be pushing out this content every day, and to have content writers and programmers and, anything and everything that goes into doing these things. Hedge fund money is behind a lot of efforts to generate cases. The only way that a small firm can survive in that environment, if you want to play in that environment, is to be so focused on a particular area that you are the best at that area. And so that those large gatherers of cases, those large lead generators, are going to want to be in business with you, because that's where the money's going to be, because you are the best at what you do.
I love the answer that you gave and the way that you gave it. It really is spot on. And I've been harping here on the podcast over the course of the last year and a half that you really need to specialize in something. And even if you have to say yes to other things, you shouldn't be saying yes to things that you need to now figure out how to do, because that derails you from the energy and the effort that you need to be working on as far as building that specialization. Now, obviously,
the most important. I'm sorry, Moshe, go ahead.
It's okay. Nope, go for it.
The most important word a lawyer, particularly a lawyer running a small practice who doesn't have a lot of room for error, the most important thing that lawyer needs to learn how to do is to say no. As attractive as something may seem, as guilty as you may feel if your aunt or your cousin says, I need your help on this, if you're not focused on that particular thing, it's going to drag down your entire model. And that's almost always where the mistakes are going to get made. Saying no to bad cases and to cases that you don't have the wherewithal or the expertise to be able to handle in an appropriate way is key to the success of a law firm.
Let me share an exciting tool that I recently came across that is a game changer for law firms that bill hourly or by the project, otherwise known as flat fee billing. The 2020 Legal Trends Report published by Clio rates how important various items are in a client choosing your firm. You may be surprised to know that the third most important decision factor for someone choosing a lawyer is the ability to pay with a payment plan. The challenge that law firm owners face is the risk of a client not making good on that payment plan. Most attorneys don't offer payment plans because of that. The problem is now solved with LawFunder. LawFunder allows you to easily add a payment option to all your client invoices and retainer replenishment requests that does not require credit checks, applications, or any other complex process. The client's able to use their existing credit cards, allowing them to earn points and miles, access credit card specials on interest rates, and any other tools they use to manage their cash. When I saw this tool, I was blown away. Most importantly, it removes all the risk from the law firm and makes an easy and painless process to the payment process. So if you want to check off the box on one of the top factors in new client decisions, if you want to decrease your accounts receivable and get paid immediately, LawFunder is the solution. Go to lawfunder.com. That's lawfundar.com/profitwithlaw to learn more.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. I want to switch gears now to the growth of the firm. You're now you have 100 people or 100 associates. I can't even keep track.
No. We have 14 lawyers, I think, and then a whole lot of support staff.
Okay, so you've grown quite a bit since those early garage days. In the navigation of that growth, where do you think the big pain points were? Or maybe if I ask the question a little bit differently, if you had to look back at the journey, what are the things that if you did this again, you would be smarter and would do differently?
Everything. The best way I can answer that is that our initial model was to really not concern ourselves as much. When I say initial model, I mean after my father joined us, was to focus less on what was going out the door as long as more was coming in the door. So we focused intently on revenue without really addressing expense. And that led us to a scenario where we had way too much expense, frankly, and way too much wasted expense. The things that the major thing I would do differently is to do things more the way we do them now. And that is that everything has to have a purpose. And you, as the leader of the firm, as the managing partner, as the solo practice attorney, you need to know precisely why you're spending the dollar you're spending and what is generating out of that dollar. It may seem a lot easier to say, I don't like the lien collection portion of this business. I'll just hire someone to come in and they'll focus on that and alleviate that burden. And it does alleviate the burden as long as the person knows what they're doing. The problem is that that's dead money. You're taking that money out of fee that you're generating and doesn't generate any other fee for you. So it becomes an expense that's not revenue generating. So I would urge anybody who's going to try to build out their firm to understand what the purpose is for the expenses that they're undertaking. If you're going to buy into advertising, or you're going to, purchase social media, buy into a social media campaign, you need to know what's coming out of that campaign. Name recognition is wonderful and certainly helps as part of a broader brand building concept. But if you can't identify what cases are coming out of that, or at least what leads are coming out of that, then you're wasting your money. Because I promise you, every outside contractor will tell you all of your cases are coming because of that individual. That is almost certainly not true. So you need to be able to identify on each and every expense you undertake. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it absolutely. I think, the name of this show is Profit with Law, and the focus is that, our focus is not to have a beautiful law firm with a bunch of people in it. When I first started my business, I had 5 law firm clients in my accounting business, and the common denominator amongst all 5 of those was beautiful office, nice sized staff, cases coming through the door, and then the owner transferring personal funds to make payroll, every payroll cycle. And that's what I saw. And I said, wait a second, there's a problem here. This needs to be addressed. Let me go out into the marketplace and see if I can help. And that's when I started this show, Profit with Law. So the name of the show says it all. The name of the game is to bring money home, not to bring it in the door and then send it right back out the door. And I love where you went with this, that you need to have a plan. You need to know what your goal is. You need to be able to track it. You need to be able to measure it. You need to be able to know that this is working or it's not working. And I love that highlight that you've provided. when it comes to team building, you had mentioned that, in the name of the game, and at least in medical malpractice, is you need to be fearless. You need to be able to, at every moment, be sure of yourself and know that this is, that you've got the upper hand. You're going to win. What's it like finding the staff that are fearless? Like how do you determine in an interview whether that person is going to be the person who's got the right ego, who's got the right attitude, who's got the grit to go through, and see this through to trial and be able to manage, in the courtroom the way that you're describing?
Well, I think that there's never a time where you are 100% sure during an interview process that someone's right. What I try to do is look for traits that I think will be helpful. For instance, medical malpractice, which is our bread and butter. Certainly, we do a lot of other things now, but medical malpractice remains our bread and butter. The vast majority of those cases, if you choose your cases correctly, are not going to go to trial. So when I'm interviewing someone for a new position, I'm certainly concerned as to whether I think they'll be able to try a case. I'm far more concerned with whether I think they'll be able to understand the medicine, understand the legal aspect of medical malpractice, and be able really to focus their attention on the logical transition of the medicine as it exists there into the law. Because ultimately every medical malpractice case that we take is an exercise in logic. If a claim of malpractice does not make logical sense to a jury, you're not going to win. You can have a case where they miscast a broken bone. If that miscast broken bone came after the gentleman had been in a horrific car accident and he had 74 broken bones, it doesn't make logical sense that a jury's going to hold that doctor accountable for that one bone when he was trying to save this person's life. So we need to take everything we do and apply logic to it. So when I'm doing this interview process, I generally do an interview process similar to what we're doing here, a back and forth conversation, where I'm trying to determine the relative intellect of the person, and I try to throw logical questions to the candidate, so I can get a sense of how their mind works, how quickly their mind works, and how they're able to move from one position to the next in a logical fashion. So that's how I do it. How everybody else does it, a lot of people focus, frankly, on the wrong things. They look for someone who perhaps has had some success in other cases. That's great, but ultimately, and that's important, but ultimately the success of a case rises and falls on the case itself and on the workup of that case, starting with the case selection process. So while someone may have had some great success in a trial, that doesn't happen unless everything was done right to get the case to that position of trial. And if that person's only coming in at the end, just a straight trial lawyer, coming in at the end, taking somebody else's work product and now being able to present that to a jury, it's valuable for sure that they can present that to a jury. But if they can't do all the other steps, going back to the question of profit, I now need two lawyers, one to do all the workup and one to try the case. That's going to cost me twice as much, if not more than twice as much. So I'm looking for that person always who can take a case from phone call to jury selection. That's what I'm looking for.
Awesome. So let me ask you this. You're in a different position today than you were many years ago as far as what you can afford in your marketing. On the marketing side, and the various campaigns that you do, and we don't need to go into all of them, what do you think is the best use of marketing dollars today that you guys are spending that's producing the best results, at least in your industry, in the malpractice industry?
Right this moment, AdWords is our biggest driver of business. In that regard, certainly the referral relationships you made reference to earlier continue to be vitally important. It is without question that the flow of cases coming through other lawyers is different today than it was 15 or 20 years ago. That's unquestionably true. But it is still important that you are part of this dialogue in terms of the referral relationships, because people look for confirmation. They may find your name online or hear about you in a podcast or whatever it may be, but then they're going to ask around about you.
So, Mike, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that often attorneys tend to overlook the referral piece, and they start to focus on the shiny rocks, the shiny object syndrome of, oh, I got to do Facebook Lives, and maybe I got to hire a marketing agency to do this. It all starts with referrals. Even today, I think when somebody first starts their law firm, that every single professional that might be able to refer them business should know that they're in business. Every family member that might be able to send them business should know that they're in business. And then from there, anybody that walks through the firm, anybody who becomes a client should get the best experience, so that when you're done, they're now a referral source. And also in today's day and age, they're writing a Google review for you, or they're wherever the review is important for you, that they're writing that review and giving you that feedback, so that somebody else who's checking you out gets that good information from you. So I recognize that that's important, but I also recognize that that's not enough, right? You have to, at least this is my opinion, you have to be able to control your own destiny. You have to be able to turn the faucet on and off. You can't just hope that the referrals are going to come in at the right time. So referrals are important, and they're a decent, potentially a decent piece of your business, but they're not predictable. And if you want to grow a firm, you have to be able to grow it predictably, which is why we have to look at these other things. And people do all kinds of things, a billboard and TV spots, and and sometimes we get way too fancy in that process. And I love that your answer was Google AdWords. I'm assuming you meant the Google pay per click. People are searching, and then your ad shows up, and they click it, and now they're checking out your firm, or they're calling your firm. And I don't want to go into the details of the marketing. I think that we have much more important things to focus on in this interview. But I just want to highlight that to our listeners, that it's pretty simple. Mike's firm is looking for people who are looking for them. And the best way to start is to go to the place, the number one place that people go to look for information, which is Google. And a lot of people are not willing to pay for that, because the cost is so high sometimes, depending on the industry, where you might end up paying $300-$400 a lead. But if you're talking about a case that's going to generate $10, $15, $20, $100,000 for your firm, why are you being cheap on $300 a lead? You got to be able to front that money and get those leads through the door to make that happen. So I definitely think that that's an interesting answer. I wasn't expecting it. And I like that was the case, because it really makes a lot of sense. I want to switch gears.
This entire business, so many people in the industry are not focused on the business end of the business. There is no other business where this sort of hope becomes a strategy. I hope people find out who I am. I hope I win this case. I hope that I get referrals. I hope. That's not a strategy for any business. If you're selling widgets, you better be out there telling people you sell widgets, however that comes about. Amazon spends fortunes of money advertising. It didn't come by accident. Any entity that is successful is in some fashion or another getting their message out there. So you are correct that AdWords and pay-per-click is an expensive proposition, particularly if you're doing personal injury type work. They are almost religiously the most expensive AdWords you can buy. If you want to buy car accident lawyer in Bronx, it's going to cost you a lot of money every time someone clicks on that. And you'd better have the resources to fight that battle. So you got to get your name out there, but you have to be smart about it. If you can't afford to be meaningfully involved in a particular type of marketing, then you need to find a better way to spend your marketing dollars. Because ultimately it comes back to the issue you raised. This is a for-profit business. If you're throwing money because everybody tells you you have to do pay-per-click, or you have to do Facebook, or you have to do this, or you have to do that, but you're not getting any work out of it, then you don't have to do it. What you have to do is what's going to bring work in that door. If that means that you are promoting picnics in certain communities that are, perhaps not benefiting as much from the economy as others, or downtrodden areas today, given what's going on in COVID, or you're involved in food banks, or whatever it is that's getting your name out there, then that's good business. It's also good for society, and more importantly. But if the purpose is to get your name out, you use any method available to get your name out there, but you do it in a way that's profitable for you. Just throwing money out for the sake of saying I do this or I do that is a waste of money.
Absolutely. Love that. I absolutely love that. So we only have a few minutes left to our interview, and I want to make sure that we address this topic. So let's switch gears to COVID. We just experienced probably the most historic year that we're going to see in our lifetime, going through a pandemic and needing to navigate that. I'd like to know what that experience was like for your firm, in a number of ways. Number one, was your firm prepared to continue working remotely when this happened? And I'm going to throw a few questions at you, and then you paint the picture. Number two, did you see a decline in the work that you're doing? And I'm assuming that a lot of your work is ongoing, so you probably have a lot of work in the pipeline that you just can continue to work on. But did you see the flow of incoming cases change based on it, for the better or for the worse? And where do you sit today, as we're hopefully nearing the end of this pandemic, but we're at the end of 2020? What do you think about the future specifically for your firm in 2021 and beyond, as far as the effects that might have happened and the ways that you might be changing that you operate because of it?
So the answer to the first part is that we were about, I'm guessing, but something like 80% ready to be remote anyway. Things, technology was moving in that direction. No matter what, there were already times where lawyers wanted to work at home, where staff, a child was ill and staff needed to stay home, but still wanted to work. So we were already transitioning somewhat to that anyway. And to highlight a point you made earlier, the big office and the expensive lease and all that is very 10 years ago thought process. We're already moving to, or trying to move to, a situation where the space is less, the work is more remote. And I think that the best description I heard about the technology aspect of this is that 2025 came 5 years early. Things were heading in that direction no matter what. I remember having this conversation with some other lawyers not that long ago, and I predicted that there would be no offices for lawyers before long, and they went around and said Duffy's getting rid of his office, which was not quite what I was saying. The point is that lawyers need to see that the trends are moving in a particular direction. This elevated or exacerbated that trend, and certainly brought it to the forefront today. So we were about 85% ready. Things we never thought about that became things we had to think about quickly included how the mail got dealt with, how a lot of what we do, or rather everything we do, is scanned into a system, and then everything is available on the case management system. Where was that scanner physically going to be located during this time that we were down, and how are we going to get things to the scanner? So those are things that we had to really kind of jump in early. I think we were, I'm proud to say we were ahead of most people by, about a week, where I think we pulled the plug about a week before a lot of other people in terms of going remote. Where that helped us was that we were maybe a week ahead of calling our IT people and getting these things moved up, so we were a little less in the queue. So we really didn't have any downturn in terms of work and production and efficiency from that. Where we saw the most difficulty was in the intake process, where the people who are answering the phones are not sitting, obviously during the pandemic, not sitting in one physical space. They're all over the place. Getting people to getting clients to become comfortable with Zoom and telephone interviews rather than in-face interviews or person-to-person interviews, and getting them comfortable with signing retainers and authorizations and the things necessary to begin an investigation remotely as opposed to in person. Those were some of the sort of stickier things that took a little time to sort themselves out. So within a short period of time, those things worked themselves out, and we didn't really have those problems. The intakes themselves, the new matters, continued to come in. Without question, the governor instituting an immunity, which I would argue is completely unnecessary and probably unconstitutional, but doing it nonetheless impacted those cases coming in, impacted our view of those cases coming in and what we thought we could and could not do with them, what we were willing to challenge and what we were unwilling to challenge. That certainly impacted things. But the single biggest thing that impacted MediMal was the healthcare delivery service out in the world, that people simply weren't going to the hospital. They weren't seeing their doctor. People are today far less likely to spend an afternoon in an emergency room than they might otherwise have been. So fewer patient interactions, fewer case calls coming in. So our focus really has been intently on the quality of what's coming in. And thus far, knock wood, things have seen no downturn in that regard. So we're very hopeful about where things are going. We didn't lay anybody off. Everybody has remained on full salary for the entirety of this, and our every expectation is that will continue. I suspect that we probably won't have jury trials back for the better part of next year. That certainly will make things different in terms of how you go about moving your cases without the hammer of a trial behind you. But for us, and I can't speak for everybody, but for us, the carriers know and the hospitals know that we're not going away and the cases are going to be there to be dealt with. So we've really haven't seen much in the way of a problem in terms of getting our cases settled. I think that might have been different if maybe we weren't as much of a known entity in medical malpractice and they didn't know what our cases were, right? Our focus when a case comes in, we make sure we're right. We don't, it can take a year or more to make a decision on a case because we break down every single possible defense and figure out why we're right. And the carriers know that. So, I think that helps out. Where I think things are going for everybody, I think things are going to go smaller. I think the ultimate impact of this downturn is that firms are going to be less inclined to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think, frankly, that the smaller firm has an economic advantage in today's world than the larger firm. There are firms in Manhattan that have 15 or 20 equity partners. Frankly, I have no idea how they're going to manage that. They don't have the ability to limit their overhead without stopping taking money, which of course impacts every aspect of their lives. So your show is about profit and the law. I think that the focus will be more on how you limit your expenses, because the opportunities for settlements for the next year or so are going to be somewhat less obvious than they may have been in the past. So I think you're really going to start to see some lawyers choose not to come back. Some lawyers choose to get out of this business altogether. Cases like medical malpractice cases that require a lot of resources to be able to bring them to conclusion. a significant medical malpractice case can cost $120,000 to bring all the way through to conclusion. I think you're going to see people less inclined to be involved in those cases because of the dedication of resources necessary. So I think you're going to see some upheaval, and I think that that's not necessarily a bad thing in the law, as long as everybody focuses on doing it well.
Now, do you think that the lack of willingness to get involved in those really, really large cases is going to mean that those that people in facing those the victims that are trying to bring those cases forward are going to have a hard time getting access to justice because of it, or do you think it's just going to be an opportunity for the handful of practices that are willing to take those, that they're just going to continue to get more and more of the market share of that?
I think it's more likely that cases that perhaps shouldn't be brought are not going to be brought. I think people that handle medical malpractice cases on a consistent basis and have a system for doing that are doing similar things to what we're doing. You make sure you're right. You're really digging in. You're spending the money up front to make sure you're right. I don't think that changes. I think what changes is someone who maybe doesn't have as much experience getting involved in a case because it sounds attractive, it sounds interesting. We get a call pretty much twice a week about a perforated colon during a colonoscopy. It always sounds attractive. It's never malpractice, or almost never malpractice. People getting involved in cases like that where they shouldn't, I think that is likely going to be less significant a situation than it is today. But I think that if you're, it's like anything else. People keep an eye out for significant damages cases. So I think certainly the most egregiously damaged and harmed people will continue to find lawyers.
Awesome. I think this is a great place for us to close the show out. We're pretty much out of time. It's been a great conversation, and I think if we didn't have the ending time, we'd keep going for another hour. But I want to ask you to leave maybe if you can leave one piece of advice. If you look at your entire career and growing your law practice, if you can hone it down into one parting piece of wisdom for our listeners. And then share with them how they might be able to learn more about your firm, collaborate with your firm in some way, or follow up with you, and we'll close it out.
Sure. It's funny when you said, what's the one piece of advice? I immediately started thinking about business, but the more I sat here and thought it through, the piece of advice I think I would give every lawyer, particularly those who are making decisions about how their future is going to develop, is that this is only one part of your life. You need to be really good at it, and you need to be fearless, and you need to have that ego, and you need to be aggressive, and you need to do all of those things. But I think if the pandemic has shown us anything, it's that there is a whole lot more to life than all of the things that we're talking about today. And you need to be able to enjoy those things. You don't want to get to the end and say, man, I built this great business, but my kids don't know me and my wife hates me and so on and so forth. And I never enjoyed life. I think you really want to have a business for the purpose of having a life. So I think that you want to be really focused and stressing the importance of your life on your business. And as new agey as that may sound, the reality is you can't be good at what we do if you're miserable in life. So you really need to be focused on the important things in life and whatever is important to you. Everybody's different. As far as the business is concerned, I go back to what I said. You need to be fearless. You need to absolutely believe in yourself 100%. You cannot question your ability. Certainly question the facts of your case and question your strategy and challenge yourself every step of the way to make sure that you get through to this jury what it is you want to present. But never question yourself. Never question your ability. Strategy question, individual not. as far as your last question, we very much look forward to working with any of your listeners who would like to participate in cases we handle. Anybody can reach me at mduffy@duffylaw.com. You can call the office. I can give you a number if you want, but it's on the website. But what we would encourage people to do is, if you think you have a medical malpractice case and you're not entirely sure what to do with it, if you think you have a big damages case and it's really attractive to you, but you're not entirely sure how to maximize the value of that case, give us a call. If we can help you, we will. If we can't, we'll certainly see what we can do to guide you in the right direction.
Awesome. That's very kind of you, and really appreciate you sharing throughout the last hour. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And Mike, it's a pleasure meeting you. And my listeners are thank you. My listeners are thrilled, I'm sure, at the end of this episode. So folks, if you really enjoyed this interview, there's one thing that you can do for us. Just reach out to a colleague and tell them, hey, check this episode out. This was really good. We'd love to get some more listeners. The best way we do that is by you sharing it. It's the ultimate referral program. If every one of my listeners shares this episode out with with somebody else, we double our listeners. So that's the one ask I have for you. If you're not subscribed to this show, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And folks, if you haven't got your ticket yet to the Law Firm Growth Summit, you definitely want to be there. 3 days of amazing goodness virtually. We're going to have a ton of great content, everything that you need to have the tools in your arsenal to build the firm of the future post-COVID. Come to the Law Firm Growth Summit, February 9 to 11, lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. Mike, it's been a pleasure. Folks, we're going to catch you. We're here twice a week. We'll catch you on our next episode. Take care.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for tuning into the Profit with Law podcast. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us, as well as helping us reach more people with this valuable content. Please leave us a rating and review in your favorite podcast directory. Join us again next time when we are back with even more strategies to profit with law.